It's the Walk Pod. It's our opposition preview. This week, we are looking at Portsmouth away at Fratton Park. I'm joined by Andy this week from Pompey's PO4 podcast. Thanks for joining me, Andy. I see and hear that you're in sunny Egypt, no less. So how are things out over there?
Hello, yeah, not too bad, thank you. Nice to be here, Phil. Thanks for having us. It's quite warm, if I'm honest. It's a bit warmer than Fratton Park normally is. And I mean, you've just experienced how dodgy our Wi-Fi is. So if this goes wrong halfway through, I'll be blaming the Egyptian Wi-Fi straight out of the gate. So yeah, bit of a change of scenery for me this week.
No worries. Like I say, I'm just very happy that you've joined me today. Thank you so much, Andy. So this podcast, just before we get into the meat and drink of the conversation, this podcast is sponsored by our good friends at Black Star Amplification and Carry On. Today, I'm using their headphones and their microphones, and we are also sponsored by the Record Shop in Amersham. They've got an enormous range of vinyl, audio and guitars. So if you're in Amersham, pop in, say that you've heard about them through the podcast, and have a chat with the guys, and I'm sure that they'll speak to you about all things Luton and vinyl and music. So Andy, I know that you guys played last night, but what I wanted to do was start this chat with your wonderful away day showing at Elland Road, and just sort of get a bit of your thoughts now that the dust has settled on that result. Because after 90 minutes, the way I saw it, all results were in play. You could have won, you could have drawn, you could have lost. So how does it feel a few days after your first game back in the Championship after so many years?
Yeah, honestly, I think you've summed it up pretty well there, Phil. So it was one of those games where it's an absolute baptism of fire, isn't it? Elland Road away, first day of the season, having come up from League One. And I don't think you'd have found many Pompey fans who really thought we were going to take anything from the game at all. And I mean, that was kind of supported in the first 10 minutes. I think Leeds hit the post 3 times within about 2.5 minutes, early doors, maybe even less than that. And, you know, they could have been 3-0 up after 10 minutes instead of 1-0 up after 10 minutes. And we were kind of feeling a little bit anxious at that point, I think. But yeah, and then you go from that to really thinking you should have seen the game out. You know, when you score a 92nd minute winner, and there's in theory only 95 or 94 minutes of the game, you're thinking we should really be able to see this out. But it would have been harsh on Leeds for them to lose that game, if we're being completely honest about it. I think if you play that game 100 times, Leeds probably win it 80 plus, maybe even more than that. So for us to snatch a point when, you know, we were under the cosh for a solid 2/3 of that game overall, I think it's an excellent point. And it's one of the very few times where we've conceded an equaliser in the 95th minute, but it still doesn't really feel like 2 points dropped, which is such an unusual feeling when you've conceded in the last minute of injury time. Just, you know, anything from these first few games is vital to us because we've got a very difficult opening to the season, the game against yourself included. So it was a very interesting game, and if all other 45 games are going to be like that, I don't know if, you know, how many of our fan base are going to make it through the season, because it was something. It made us realise how nice it is to be back in the Championship anyway. You know, proper clubs we're playing against.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. What a baptism of fire to go to Welland Road. I mean, like I say, you said it yourself. They were all over you for the first 10 minutes. I admit, I watched the game because I kind of wanted to do a bit of a scouting mission on you guys, and that's not to be disrespectful, but you just don't get the coverage when you're in League One, even in the Championship. We've noticed this season already after just one game week that the level of coverage between Premier League and the Championship goes down, and it subsequently goes down throughout the leagues as well. So it was interesting for me to see you guys. And did it sort of change your expectations for the rest of the season? I mean, maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but my understanding would be that first and foremost it would be consolidating in the Championship. Is that still the remit despite that positive result of the weekend?
It certainly is. Yeah, I don't think we get too high or too low after one 90-minute game. To be honest with you, I think the remit this season is, as you say, just consolidation. You look at, you know, there's a couple of players in that Leeds team where the player fee for an individual is greater than the player fees we've paid for our entire squad. And we've gone from realistically what was, you know, we were a fairly big fish in a pond in League One. We've completely flipped now. We are very much at this stage in our development cycle as a club, a smaller fish in the Championship. However much of a, you know, a sort of confirmed Championship or Div 1 team we've been in the past, we are now trying to climb back up the league again. So I think this year is certainly consolidation. I think the first 10 minutes we all went a bit, ooh, oh dear. Everything is certainly. I mean, just as an example, you could see, Conor Ogilvie, who was playing left back for us, was just fantastic last season. And, we're not going to jump on his back for one 90-minute performance here.
Mm.
But after he'd looked so assured and no one really got the better of him much in League One all season, Dan James did him about 4 times in the first
Yeah,
13 minutes of the game, including the penalty giveaway, and was just a step ahead of him for the first start of the game. And that's nothing against Conor Ogilvie, because Dan James is going to do that to a lot of players in the
yeah,
Championship this season. But I think it immediately showed us how much that step up really is going to be. And again, I'm yet to find out how some of these other teams in the Championship play compared to Leeds, but the speed of the game, it just felt like half a beat quicker.
yeah,
Like, not enough that it's really changes the overall viewing of the game, but it's noticeable when you're seeing your players just sort of half a step behind the 8 ball at times.
yeah,
So it hasn't really changed where we see us. We're no one at Pompey is thinking we're going to do an Ipswich and go back to back. There's
yeah,
nobody who's thinking that that's a realistic end goal for the season. I think we just need to consolidate, and with a fan base that over the last few years has got fairly impatient. I think it's fair to say, languishing a little bit in League Two and then League One for 7 years. I think having to suddenly find patience and realise this is not going to be a quick, jump up to the playoffs and win 2 in a row and then we're in the Prem kind of thing, which not all Pompey fans really want to do, to be honest with you, anyway. But that's another conversation. But there's going to have to be some patience there, I think. And if we finish 17th, 18th, 19th this year, I'll be thrilled. Genuinely, I'll be so pleased just to consolidate and then build on it next season.
yeah. I think if you take Ipswich out of the equation, and I know this is going to sound very egotistical, like I'm bringing it round to Luton, but it is a Luton podcast. But I think a lot of people will look at our journey, especially from League One, when we went up from League One, and the first season in the Championship. It was a real struggle. But the point is that we got there, and we managed to stay up, and that was the main thing. And then from there, mid-table, from there, playoff push. Whereas Ipswich have changed the sort of change the script a little bit from what happened last year. So it's really nice to speak to sort of someone that's sensible and understands what their club can realistically do, and understand
Yeah,
the reality of it is that going straight into the Premier League is a near on impossibility, and last year was a bit of a freak. So and it was also
yeah,
interesting to sort of hearing, just picking up on the player that you mentioned, because I said that I was watching the game as almost like a scout, almost. And I think that Ogilvie did stand out just purely because Dan James was sort of gave him a bit of a torrid time with his pace. And I was sort of rubbing my hands before I went and played Burnley. Before Luton went and played Burnley, I was rubbing my hands thinking, oh, Bene's going to
yes,
run past him and I'm going to make him look silly. And
yeah.
then we played Burnley, and I'm thoroughly depressed. As much as I'm laughing, I'm actually really quite sad about it. But anyway, back to Portsmouth. This is the opposition view, not so much about Luton. So I was in
That's
terms of
right. We're gonna
players.
grill you, Phil.
Yeah,
We're going to grill you on our podcast in about an hour's time. So save that rant up. Don't worry
I
about
will do. I will do. Trust me, you'll get the full brunt of it.
it.
But I was particularly impressed, other than not just from his wonderful strike from outside the area, but also the calmness of Callum Lang to put that penalty away in the 92nd minute under that pressure. And I know that you bought him from Wigan, is that right? And how
Yeah.
has he been for you? And how important do you think he's going to be for you guys moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. He looked very composed throughout the whole game, didn't he? He was sort of one of those players that just really put in an above average performance, even aside from his goals. I think his overall
Yeah,
performance was certainly one of the stronger in the side. As soon as he came into the team last year, it made an impact. It was really noticeable in terms of a little bit more excitement. I think his first game was Oxford away, and he came on in the second half in a bit of what had been quite a drab game, to be honest with you, and scored one. And it looked like he was going to set us up for a win, but then we conceded in the last couple of minutes in that game. But kind of turned a very drab Pompey performance around, and he was the one real positive to come from that on his debut. And he just seems to be one of those players that's always on his toes and looking to take advantage of a situation. There were a couple of games towards the end of last season, I think one of which was Northampton, and I can't remember the other one, where we're defending a free kick literally at the edge of our penalty area and the opposition play it forward, and he just nips in, takes it, and just legs it up the other end of the pitch. And he's just on his toes for those little opportunities in a way that some other players are just on their heels thinking about defending the free kick.
Yeah,
he's looking to, proactively change what's happening at that moment in the game. And I think it was the Northampton game, he ended up setting up a goal or scoring it, and the other game didn't end in a goal, but probably should have done. It was quite a high XG chance. So yeah, he looks a step above
yeah,
some other players that we've seen coming on in sort of attacking midfield. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It was just composure with the
yeah,
penalty, but even outside of that, just he looked like a calming influence. And in such a frantic game, like the game was
yeah,
mental. To be honest with you, it was
yeah. It
absolutely
was.
mental.
It was.
If you've got any form of calming influence in that game, it's going to have a huge impact.
Yeah,
When people around you are losing their heads, if you can be the one that takes a deep breath and you know calms things down, then it's an asset to the team.
yeah. I mean, well, speaking of calmness under pressure, it brings me to another player that I remember not necessarily too fondly because he was very, very good many, many years ago when he was playing for Cheltenham. He came to Kenilworth Road and they beat us 1-0, and it was thoroughly depressing because he put on a bit of a show. But you've got Marlon Pack, and I thought that his assist for your first goal at the weekend was unbelievable. The vision to be able to sort of cut that pass
Mm.
back at an angle was great. And he's another one where he's an experienced head now within the camp. So him as well as Lang and as well as some of the other lads um, that have got a bit more experience will hopefully hold you in good stead in this return back to the championship. I'd like to think.
Yeah, Marlon Pack. I mean, he's a Pompey lad from back in the day, sort of 2008, 9, 10, somewhere around that ballpark. And coming back to Fratton Park to take on the club captaincy. I mean, he's a Pompey fan. It's everyone's dream, really, isn't it? As a football supporter, to get to play for your club, captain your club,
Yeah,
win a league trophy with your club, get them promoted back to the championship. He's been absolutely living the dream. And I mean, how I normally describe him is the biggest compliment I can play is that if you watch the game and you don't know who the club captain is and you watch our individuals, you'd know it was him
mm,
from the way he directs play, keeps his composure for the most part, not afraid to berate people if needs be if something hasn't gone right, but in a calm manner, just tries to run the show. And I
yeah,
mean, off the pitch, he's done a lot for the club and for the community. He was nominated last year for I think it was the EFL Player in the Community Award. He didn't win it, but he was
brilliant.
shortlisted. So he's done quite a lot with Pompey in the community as well, and just represents the club well on and off the pitch. He speaks well. You can tell he absolutely loves the club. He used to sit in Fratton Park and watch the team that he now plays
Yeah.
for. He's got a bit of a link with Matt Ritchie, who came in last week as well. They were
Yep.
both at the club as youngsters around a similar time. So there's that link there. And you can it kind of feels like it's the first time we've really had a captain running the show, probably since Michael Doyle, I would go as far to say, when we won League Two.
Yeah.
And he was sort of just a calm head, composed shoulders, a bit more of an elder statesman than Marlon Pack is. But honestly, it's his composure. And you mentioned the assist there. Even knowing his composure, when the ball came out to him, I was 90+% sure that he was going to try a first time shot from 30 yards. And occasionally he hits absolute howitzers, but more often than not, in League One and Championship football, they don't go top corner. Otherwise, you wouldn't be playing Championship and League One football. So I was absolutely dead certain, the adrenaline of first game back in the Championship, captaining your side, you want to hit one top bins from 35 yards. And instead of that, he first time picks out a delicious little ball through to Sorensen, who, finished it with a little bit of help from the Leeds goalkeeper, who is I think probably the weak link for their team this season. Having a look at it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, just composure in the moment to be able to just not let that adrenaline rush and the opportunity to smack it from 35 yards out on your return to the championship in front of the away fans. I wouldn't have had that much restraint. I would have been trying
Yeah.
to hit that into the top corner, and it would have gone out for a corner instead. So
Yeah,
fair
because
play
he's
to
got,
him.
like you say, he's got it in his locker. Like it might be the fact that eight
Mm,
times out of 10 he doesn't, but he has got it in his locker. So
mm,
it showed tremendous restraint. And
yeah,
ultimately, you said about the Leeds goalkeeper, but to me, I think you still need to acknowledge Sorensen and sort of say, look, he's a striker, hit it as hard as you can and get it on target, and you never know what can happen. So,
yeah,
I mean, he was the next player I was going to say because obviously you're missing Colby Bishop because he's had an operation on
yeah.
his heart, I understand. So it'll be Sorensen again, I'm presuming,
Correct.
on Saturday. Is that most
I
likely?
would think so. Yeah, I mean the options we have up top now are Sorensen and Cassini Yengi, really, who would be your ideal number nines. Katina Yengi he made his Australian debut reasonably well in the last year or so, and he scored a few for them since then. But he missed the Leeds game with a groin injury, and we don't
Right.
really know how serious that is. The fact that he wasn't even in the squad for the Millwall game either, albeit a Carabao Cup game. I mean, he's not going to start. He's not going to come in and suddenly start the game. I don't know how many weeks he's out for. It's possible. I have no idea. He could be on the subs bench, but I'd be very surprised. So I'd imagine we'll start with Sorensen up top, who is a completely unknown quantity to all of us.
Yeah.
We don't really watch Danish. Was it second division, third
Yeah.
division football?
Yeah.
I try to watch as much as I can, but there is a limit before I end up being broken up with and alone. So I do have to not watch football some of the time. So yeah, didn't have a clue about him coming in,
Yeah.
but he's been banging him in one of the Danish leagues, and then but he's not got many minutes under his belt, to be honest with you, in the off season, because he arrived fairly late in the window. He didn't really play that
Yeah.
much pre-season, and he's not got 90 minutes in him, I wouldn't think. So I'd imagine we'll go a similar route than we did against Leeds, where he starts, and then you'll get someone like Christian Sadie coming on later on to sort of finish the game at 9, even though most of Sadie's career at Pompey has been playing in more of a 10 role.
Right.
But he can play at 9 as well. But I don't think his finishing is really good enough to play at a 9 role consistently.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit bare bones. Obviously, the Colby Bishop heart condition, he had surgery last week, which apparently went well,
Good.
thankfully.
Good.
But obviously, cardiac surgery, you're looking at he's realistically out for 6 months plus. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
John Messino said today quite correctly, they're not even talking about football. There's no
Good.
point,
Yeah. I
just
think
seeing how he
from
gets on with walking and jogging.
yeah, I think from our experiences with Tom Lockyer, I think it's just one of those ones where you
Yeah.
just want him to be okay, and as much time as it takes, don't worry about it. Just get yourself better. That's the main thing. So, like I say,
Yeah,
best
it's
wishes
bigger
to
than
him.
football, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly, best wishes to him. And like I say, there's bigger things than football, as you said. So we'll move on slightly to looking at the weekend. I mean, last time we played each other, that I can remember was a cold January night back in 2019, where we managed to nick it 3-2 thanks to a last minute free kick from George Moncur in the snow. So we've got quite good memories of that. I think that was the last time we played anyway.
Sounds
But
plausible.
but how do you see the game going this weekend? What are you? And if it's okay, Andy, I said to you earlier on about we doing the Sluga 6, so it's double points for the Pompey versus Luton game. So if you could at some point in your explanation as to how you think the weekend's going to go, give me a bit of a scoreline as well. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. I think realistically, we're not getting overly carried away after an incredible point at Leeds because, like I said earlier, realistically, more often than not, we would have got nothing from that game. So it's a bonus. I genuinely see your season and our seasons having very different primary goals. So again, with all due respect, I don't think a result against you is going to make or break our season either way,
Yeah.
because I don't think we're fighting for the same things this year, if I'm being completely honest.
Yep.
So I I can't really see a comfortable Portsmouth win. Even I know you got turned over last night by what I've heard is a very very good Burnley team by the sounds of it,
Yeah.
who have they've spent a good chunk of money, they got parachute payments, etc. etc. There, but they are a very well oiled team. That being said, I mean, realistically, there's going to be a bounce back from your squad, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I know that. Am I right in thinking you had a couple of academy players who were playing the other night
We
as well?
have.
Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So,
So
like,
we
I
actually we had 4 teenagers, I think it was, that were on the pitch. I think the big worry for us, and like I say, we'll explore it a little bit later on when I join your podcast, is that our defence is just so heavily depleted that's the big worry. And I think
Mm,
when it came up against Burnley, who obviously a Premier League side last year as well, they just had too much for us going forward, and they schooled us, really, to be honest with you. So it's
mm.
quite worrying from our perspective. But like I said, I think you're right. I think we're going to have to bounce back. I'd like to think that they've been given a right rollicking, because it wasn't good enough on Monday night.
Okay, in which case, I genuinely think it could be another fairly high scoring game then, because I mean we're in a similar position in terms of I'd say we're pretty good going forward, with the possible exception of if Sorensen isn't entirely match fit. Number 9 is a bit of an iffy one, but our wing play should be quite good, and we've in theory got a pretty good centre midfield, although it's a little bit lacking in depth. So, and it's our defence where I'd say we're definitely vulnerable in that, with injuries, etc. At the moment, we've got Riley Towler starting as one of our centre backs, and he wasn't in our League One starting 11, but
Oh,
because of
right.
injuries, he is now starting in the league above. So it's a real test for him, and we're hoping he steps up. But I'd say, based off that and seeing, the uh, the experience that players like Dan James gave us at the weekend, I'd be slightly concerned about your attacking threat. So I think it could genuinely be fairly high scoring again, which probably means it's going to be a 0-0 or a 1-0. But I can see it being a 4-2 Luton or something, or a 3-all.
Okay.
I need to pick one score, don't I? I
Yeah,
don't
pick
like
one.
picking Pompey losses. So I'll go with a 2-all draw.
2-2 draw.
I
Lovely.
think that we'd snap your hand off for that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's probably not the best thing to go for in these Super Six things. You're meant to go for the statistically more common results, aren't you? So 2-all is definitely not that, but
That's all right.
I
That's
can
all
see
right.
it being over quite easily over 3.5 goals or 4.5
Yeah,
goals or something along those lines. Because I think by the sounds of it, both defenses are a little bit vulnerable to
definitely.
pace, and both of our
Definitely.
attacking sides have got pace. So
Yeah. Well, like I say, thank you for giving us that. And like I say, what we'll do is, if it's okay, I'll go through the five other the fixtures. So just to give you a bit of an idea, it's 3 points for a direct hit. It's 1 point for getting the correct result. And no points for getting it wrong. So
okay.
the second fixture that I've got down is Plymouth versus Hull.
Well, I mean, I'm obviously going to go for a whole win because Plymouth are full basket case these days, which is fairly satisfying if I'm being completely frank with you. But let's go. I mean, it's got to be a whole win. I'll go 3-1 Hull.
3-1, lovely. And then the second one, I think, is arguably to the neutral, is the sort of game of the week, which is West Brom versus Leeds. That could be a really interesting one.
Yeah, that's a tough one to call, isn't it? Ooh, good luck editing the blanks out of these while I start thinking.
Don't worry,
West
Andy.
Brom Leeds. I'll I'll go with a Leeds win. I'll go 2-1 Leeds.
2-1 Leeds, lovely. And then we've got Derby versus Borough.
That's quite a tough one to call as well.
Mm,
I think Derby are very gettable too at the moment. Their fan base are quite, if you can get on top of their fans early on, they turn quite quickly. So if Borough
yeah.
can do that, I'll go with a 2-0 Borough win.
2-0, yeah, that was common actually. We already did these predictions on the main podcast
Mm.
recording on Sunday, and that's the third two
Oh,
0
gotcha.
Borough that we've got. So
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah,
Well,
so
we'll either all be wrong together or I've done
yeah, we
okay.
can all
So
be wrong together and we can be in good company. So two more. There's Burnley versus Cardiff.
it's got to be a Burnley win, hasn't it? I'll go 3-0 Burnley.
3-0. Yep, you've gone one up on the other. We've got a 1-0, three 2-0s, and now we've got a 3-0. And then the last fixture is Swansea versus Preston.
Ooh, that's a tough one. See, you're talking to a fan who's not been in the
Of
Championship for the
course, yeah.
last
Sorry,
seven,
Andy, I didn't. I
like
forgot
10
about
years.
that.
So
Yeah.
all of these games, you've got years worth of knowledge from your way up and you're coming back down again. So let's go. I mean, Preston obviously are going to be. I'm guessing they've got a caretaker manager in.
Yeah,
So based
yeah.
off that alone, I'll go with Swansea just because ever so slightly more continuity, even though they lost opening day of the season. We'll go Swansea 2-1.
Swansea 2-1. Perfect. Andy,
I
thank
can't
you so
believe Wayne
much.
Rooney wasn't the first manager to go, by the way, this season. But
I know, but no one would have expected anyone to go after one game, would they? So Preston
no,
have
quite.
thrown a right screwball in there. So yeah, but okay, Andy, thank you so much for your time and your contributions to this podcast. It's been thoroughly good to speak to you and get to know a little bit more about Pompey in the build up to our game against you on Saturday lunchtime. Just before I give another nod to our sponsors, Andy, is it all right to just ask you to share a little bit about your podcast, potentially tell the listeners your tags on Twitter, etc., so they know where to follow?
Absolutely, yeah. So, firstly, I'd like to apologise for my poor audio quality. This is probably the worst audio quality you're ever going to get from us, as I'm on my phone without any of my mic set up. So, apologies for that, Phill. But in terms of where you can find us, we are at PO4cast, so the start of the Fratton postcode, and then cast on Twitter. You can also follow at Pompey News now. So it's Hugh, myself, and Freddie present that one. And if anyone really enjoys your dulcet tones, Phill, there's another opportunity to hear more of them this week. Or if I'm assuming if you win on Saturday, they might be quite, or your listeners might be quite happy to listen to three slightly depressed Portsmouth fans next week. So we tend to record Wednesdays and then try and publish on Thursday. So everyone is very welcome to come and have a listen to us either in the preview or or in the post-mortem after the game. Hopefully not a post-mortem.
We'll see. But anyway, Andy, thank you again so much. That's all for me this week on the opposition preview. Just another final shout out to our audio partner, Black Star Amplification, and Carry On for providing our sound equipment, and also to our pod sponsor, the Record Shop in Amersham. Make sure to follow We Are Luton Town on X by following @TheWalkPod or @WeAreLuton Town. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our new YouTube channel. If you'd like to carry on watching us on YouTube channel, you can see all of our wonderful bearded faces on YouTube. If you don't just want to listen to us, but we won't be offended if you just listen. So take care, everyone. Come on, you at us, and we'll see you at Fratton Park on Saturday.